This evening, I would like to speak to you briefly in an important message called the case for baseless love. This is an important word that the Lord just given me as we enter to the 9th of Av. And I'd like to start with explaining, as we saw in the book of Jeremiah, the book of Lamentation written by Jeremiah, we have seen the reason for the Churban. In Tractate Yoma, chapter 9, we read an interesting passage to explain why the first and the second temple have been destroyed. What is it? It says, however, concerning that the people during the second temple period were engaged in Torah study. So the reason that the temple was destroyed, it's not because people did not have enough Torah, they didn't study enough Torah. It's not because they didn't observe the mitzvot, or did they have not act of kindness, okay? People were doing this, okay? But look at what it says. And that they did not perform the sinful acts that were performed in the first temple. In essence, they were studying Torah, they were doing mitzvot, there was act of loving kindness, yet the second temple destroyed it the same day. The question is why? Our sages asked the question, why? Yoma 9:9b give us the answer. Why was the second temple was destroyed? It was destroyed due to the fact that there was wanton hatred, sinat chinam, baseless hatred during that period. This come to teach you that sin of wanton hatred is equivalent to the three transgressions: idol worship, forbidden sexual relationship, and bloodshed. And how interesting it is that we are talking about this today in an evening that we are just seeing in the evening, friends, of Tisha B'Av in Israel, bloodshed. Go to ynet.co.il, the leading premier newspaper in Israel, and see the bloodsheds that are taking place in 9th of Av. And today, as people were praying, it's happened for the second time in 3 years. A stone from the temple was falling down. Remember 2 years ago, as the stone was falling down, a snake appeared. The rabbis of Israel said, the coming of the Mashiach is imminent. This year, we have a fighting between Orthodox Jews and Reformed Jews in the wall. And what happened? Another stone has fallen. And Chazal here is saying the problem during the time of the destruction of the temple, telling us that the way one treats his neighbor is what's going to bring the Geulah, or the delay of Geulah, or bring this God to withdraw his Shekinah away from Zion. Now, look with me for a second at what the book of Lamentation says. I want to focus on 1 or 2 verses with you today. The question we have to ask ourselves is, how do we deal with sinat chinam? What is the opposite of sinat chinam? If it is true what it says in Yoma 9, that the temple was destroyed because they were act of baseless hatred, we need to understand what is the antidote to baseless hatred. When you think about the antidote of baseless hatred, probably what comes to your mind is the word baseless love. Tonight, for a few moments, I would like to define for you the antidote and the accelerated, the opposite of the baseless hatred. Look at what it says in the book of Lamentation. The book of Lamentation is giving us the answer in the 3rd chapter, that is divided to 66 verses, repeated 3 times, Aleph to Taf, Aleph to Taf, Aleph to Taf. 66 verses. It says, Tov lagever. Let's look at this together. Tov lagever ki isa ol beneorav. It is a good for a man when young to bear a yoke. The entire answer on how to deal with sinat chinam, on baseless hatred in our life. If we represent the temple, we don't want our personal temple to destroy it. That's in the micro level. But in the macro level, if we are called to build a Mishkan, remember, Israel have to build a Mikdash before God dwell in it. In Exodus chapter 25, verse 8, God said to Israel, what is to say? And you're to build me a tabernacle, and shachanti betochechem, so I will dwell inside of you. So the establishing of the Mikdash is a prerequisite for the Shekinah to come and dwell in us, to dwell in this house. The house have to be established. Each and every one of us represent a miniature Bet Mikdash. It is true. And corporately, we represent a giant Bet Mikdash. Now, the question is, if a destruction can happen by baseless hatred, how do we do the opposite? And here the prophet Yirmiyahu is giving us an answer. He's giving us an answer in one word that I need you to learn with me here in 9th of Av. It's this word, Ol. O-L is the word Ol. Ol translate into English as the word yoke. But let us understand what is the word Ol mean. And Chazal giving us an amazing definition for the word yoke. Again, if we read it in the term, in the context of the text, it says to bear a yoke. It is good for a man when he's young to bear a yoke. The question is, which yoke are we talking about? Yeshua is speaking a lot about the yoke, but the word yoke is never truly defined. But Chazal here define for us what is the meaning of the word yoke. Yoke equal musar. Musar. Musar does not have really a good translation in English, but sometimes it's translated as the word ethics. In essence, what it's saying here, it is good to a man when he's young to bear ethics, to learn ethics, to learn interrelational skills. Chazal says the following, and I quote, Tov la-gever ki hisa ol b'ne'urav. It is good for a man to learn yoke in his childhood or in his youth. And what is a yoke? The Chazal give us 3 different types of yokes to consider. Number 1, the yoke of Torah. The Torah represent a yoke. The yoke of Torah, to carry the Torah, to feel the weight of Torah, is one of the way that we can combat this baseless hatred. When a person feel upon his shoulder, the word yoke is feeling the weight upon your shoulder. So when it says yoke of Torah, yoke of marriage, and yoke of your work. Chazal gave us 3 different yokes that the prophet is speaking about. The yoke of knowing how to conduct yourself. The yoke of knowing how to lead your family, your wife, your spouse, and your children is another yoke. And then the yoke of the work that you do inside a kingdom. The melacha, the word is not avodah, the word is melacha. It comes from the word the malchut, the kingdom. And today, in the 9th of Av, we have to shift our thinking and to receive a yoke, the burden of bringing and establishing the Torah in the kingdom that we are to be building. And if you stop and think about this today, we are members of a kingdom. That's what he says. In Ephesians chapter 2, he said, you are no longer foreigners. You are no longer strangers, but you're fellow citizens. If you're a fellow citizen, it means that as you receive the rights, you also receive the responsibility. So the very first thing we must do in order to correct the sinat chinam is to know and to say we are responsible. And this is taking a lot out of us, because a lot of us look at the world today and we remove ourselves from this equation. We say we're not responsible for what's happening in the country. We're not responsible for what's happening in Israel. We're not responsible for what's happening. And I am telling you today, especially if you're an American, you are responsible for what's happening in Zion. You know why? Because Israel look at America and they imitate America. When I go to Israel and I ask them, what do you think about America? They quote to me things that are unrealistic, because this is the perception that America has given to the world. And one of the things that you and I have to think about today is this yoke and this burden, and say we have a yoke and a burden to correct this, starting with those who we put on the White House, those who are the government officials, those who represent us. We have a responsibility, especially towards Zion today. You see, what happened in the book of Lamentation is important for us to understand. The people start to feel entitled. Oh, I am a citizen of Beverly Hills, Jerusalem, and I have a prime location 200 meters from the temple. People start to feel very good about it, but they forgot the yoke. The word yoke in Hebrew means ethics, musar, actually. It's speaking about this social responsibility, this social conscience. Isn't it interesting that we're talking right now about social distancing? What is social distancing? It's something that distances us from one each other. But when we talk about the all of the Torah, we are talking about the things that take us closer to one another, the things that unite us, the things that bring us toward one another. And here the prophet Jeremiah says to us, all Torah, all Isha, all Melech, it's a burden. When you're in the kingdom, you work in a burden. And the prophet look and say, how can it be that the children, my golden children, my pride and joy, Yerushalayim, how can they falling to be this common stone? The reason is this: when a person stop walking with the all, the ethics, the conviction, and he start to feel entitlement, and you want to know what has happened? What is happening, and I talk about this in my new book, The Gospel According to the COVID-19, we as a society started to feel entitled, just like Jerusalem, just like the inhabitants of Jerusalem. And it's caused the people to be, what is the text says, cruel. But the Hebrew word achzar speak about selfishness, being selfish. This is the reason, friends, to the destruction of the temple. When I'm watching pictures like I watched today, when I want that person who dressed in black and white, I'm not talking about one person. I'm talking about hundreds. Take a kippah off a person's head and smack his head, and take the talit and spit on him, and he does it in the name of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And yet I am seeing all the Orthodox Jews, Messianic Jews, oh, we want to be like the Orthodox. No, you don't want to be like the Orthodox. Excuse me. You don't. Because there is no love. There is absolutely no love in a place that have no musar. No musar means no love. Then this is an important word for us this evening, because it's happening in Jerusalem, and sadly, I say it in pain, it is happening again. So if the prophet is saying to bear, it is good for a man when he's young to bear yoke, and the word yoke mean ethics, it means musar. What is this musar look like? What is our musar toward one another should be look like? If the formula for building the temple is in our relationship, exactly what is it that we need to do? This is the question that I want everybody to ask during this fast day of Tisha B'Av. What is the burden that me, Rabbi Shapira, need to feel toward you? What is the burden that you, wherever you are, need to feel today toward your brother, toward your sister, toward your neighbor, toward your friend, toward the Jewish people? What is this look like? In essence, the question of the book of Eicha is, what is this yoke in our relationship should look like? Here is the answer. I told you this word in Hebrew is the word musar. By the way, it is also the yoke of our labor, of our work. We are taking upon ourselves now the work of this siddur. I don't want to do this siddur. You know why? Because I don't get to sleep. I don't get to see my son. I don't get to see my wife. I sit, I pray, I write, I pray, and I do that. Why? Because there is a yoke for the work of the kingdom. And it's something that Yeshua understood when he took the glass. It says that his sweat turned into blood, friends. It says, and he said to the Lord, there's no other way. And he knew there was no other way. Why did he do it? Because Yeshua is the ultimate example, all the way up to death, of somebody who took upon himself the yoke of the kingdom. So this yoke of the kingdom will affect the people outside yourself, even if you have to suffer. And here the prophets speak about this yoke. And this evening I want to talk for a few moments on the yoke of our relationship, friends. Look at this. The Hebrew word yoke, ol, his definition is the word musar, a horizontal relationship. So please, again, make yourself the note that when the prophet here said to bear the yoke, you can put in brackets for yourself, the yoke of the relationships. He's speaking about the yoke of the relationship with one another. I said it before, I said it again. Those who agree with you, those who disagree with you, never break relationship, because that is the yoke that connects the kingdom to the builders of the kingdom. And when we break the yoke of this relationship, we are breaking the builders, and we ended up with a disjointed kingdom. And if we ended up with a disjointed kingdom, we cannot build a kingdom for the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, friends. And that is exactly what happened in Jerusalem. Everybody was building his own kingdom. We have a problem in America. We don't like to collaborate. We love independent spirits. We love to do what we want to do because we hear from the Lord and we feel from the Lord. If it is from the Lord, indeed, it is going to be collaborative. And this is our model here in Ahavat Ammi ministry. We want it to be a collaboration. Some people don't. They want to be the star of the show. They want to be in the middle. But guess what? It's not about you. It's not about me. It's about the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords and his home and his house that may be speedily established in our day. This word yoke, again, I want to stress it to everybody who watching me. This is a very important lesson from Eicha. It's a lesson, he says, to bear the yoke of relationship. And I challenge you today, take a relationship that is broken today and go fix it. Go take 2 stones, mend them together. Even if the one stone cannot join fitly together, Ephesians says that those stones will fit together. Why don't you take the action to fit them together before a destruction will come? This is a message that we need to take forward, friends. So look what it says. How do we do it? What does this yoke look like? Look at this. The word in Hebrew for the yoke is the word mesirut. Mesirut is defined from the word musar. Do you know that the Hebrew word ethics, what we consider ethics, has related to the word mesirut? There are two words with the same root, mem, samech, reish, that mean two different things, but they are connected. And let me draw the connection for you for a moment. The word musar have to deal with a conduct, the way you conduct yourself, okay? The word mesirut has to do with the way you conduct yourself. And that is the antidote for the destruction. Mesirut means, there is no definition, by the way, to the word mesirut in English. I will do the very best way to explain mesirut, because this is the principle that I would like you to take with you to the night of Av. Mesirut, to pass down everything that is inside of me to somebody else. That's the way you define mesirut. Let me say it again in another way. To take everything that is in you, everything that is your being, and pass it to somebody else. Can you imagine? Taking everything inside of you, emptying yourself, and passing it to somebody else. I know only on one person in human history that was willing to do that, to teach us about mesirut and the category of mesirut that called mesirut nefesh, and his name is Yeshua. He was willing to lay his life and to empty himself for our benefit, for ours. How much more we are to conduct our own life in mesirut and mesirut nefesh toward our brothers and toward our sister today. The message of Tisha B'Av is a message of the Musar that will lead us to lay our life toward one another. But you see, that was the problem in Jerusalem. People thought that the universe is around them. It was all about me and I. It's only about my desire, my wants, my needs. And they forgot about the mesirut nefesh. And God says, not also quick, if you do not practice mesirut nefesh, there will be no musar. And if there is no musar, there is no Torah. And if there is no Torah, there will be cruelty and Hamas in Jerusalem. And if there is Hamas in Jerusalem, that the land will be destroyed. You follow this? This is an important thing. The principle today that we have to talk about is the principle of mesirut. And look what Chazal says in explaining mesirut. Let's learn together what is mesirut. And I quote, and I'm going to paraphrase to you straight from our sages. It is good for a man to carry upon himself, he's quoting from Lamentation chapter 3, the yoke. What is the meaning behind carrying the yoke of a relationship? Are you ready? It means vahisbol yesurin lekabrat avonot orav. This is a shocking statement. Take a breath. And he, the person who carried the yoke, will take upon himself as an atonement the sins and the transgressions of his own parents. I want to stop there because I'm going to get loud, and I cannot get loud because my voice. A person who's taking upon himself the yoke will be even willing to take upon himself the sins and the crimes and the transgression of his own mom and dad. Why? Because it says, Ki ra'ui laben lachus al nafshot horav. Because it is worthy for a son or a daughter to have mercy upon the souls of his parents, no matter how bad and how ugly and how terrible the parents are. You want to know what is carrying the yoke of the Musar? What does it mean to have the ethics of the king of the kingdom? Is to take the worst parents. And some of you are watching me today, you probably have a terrible parents. Some of you have been abused. Some of you have been rejected. Some of you have been through traumas. And the prophet says, blessed is the one who learned how to suffer for his own mom and his own dad. And listen to the continuation. And ken ya'aseh lekaparat avonot kol Israel. Wow. Now we're getting to what's called kal v'chomer. Do you think it's a big deal? Oh, I forgive my mom and dad. No. The prophet here, the Darshan, the Midrash explained, just as he forgive all of his mom and dad transgression, he will do the same for the atonement of all of Israel. He himself become the atonement for the sin of Israel. When we say in Judaism that one cannot atone for the sin of another, it is not true. By us taking upon ourselves the yoke of somebody else's sins, we can exercise the greatest merit inside the house of Israel. Why? It's explained. Why would a man would be so crazy, the Midrash would be so crazy as to make a kapara upon all of Israel? Why? And here is the answer. ומה גם שהאיש האוהב את אדוני אינו חושש על עצמו. A man or a woman that truly love God. Do you love God today? A man or a woman who truly love God, ultimately it says, is not worried for himself. He is not worried to take the sins of others upon himself. He is not worried to lay his life for his own brother. Does that sound like somebody that we know who said something similar? Hint, hint. I know that you do know that. He says the man who is willing to become a living atonement and lay his life for his brother, he's a man who loves God. Because this man, it says, El al kvod kono. He is not worried about his own flesh. He's worried about the one who is purchasing him, who is God himself. And therefore he wants to purify the things that become rotten and corrupted, or the things that others around him have made rotten and corrupted. His entire being, an entire existence, is to purify the defect. Why? And here is where you need to take a deep breath, because he helped to ease the pain and agony of the Messiah. Let me say it to you again, what it says, שכל חפצו ורצונו לתאר הפגעים של מעלה ולהקל מצער המשיח. When you lay your life for another person, you are doing two things. You are helping to make a tikkun for the person who sinned. But here is what Chazal say. The Messiah is sitting in the heaven. He's not doing Havana Gila. He's lamenting. As Rachel lamenting over her children, Mashiach is sitting and is weeping right now over Yerushalayim in Tisha B'Av. When he sees the picture of a Jew fighting against a Jew, he's crying. Yeshua is crying. But when one of us come and lay his life for another Jewish neshama, it is as we wipe the tears of the Messiah eyes. Are you hearing what I'm telling you? Why? And here it says, because the Messiah, it says in Shesovel Yesurim al Avonot Israel. The Messiah is sitting right now and he's running sacrifices around the clock in his heavenly temple, and he's crying and crying and crying. And it's have a name. It's called Vezet Tsar HaShamayim. This is the worst kind of sadness. This is the most difficult sadness. It's called the heavenly sadness. But when we come along and we partner with Messiah, we give Mashiach, we give him some breathing room to continue to work. Messiah needs us today to take upon the yoke of the kingdom, because when we take this yoke that is called the Musar of the kingdom, that's what it says. We are helping the Messiah to make his job. We're becoming a partners with Mashiach. And this word partnering is the word chaver. Chaver doesn't mean friends. Chaver mean to join, to partner them with the Messiah. We are talking today about partnering with the Messiah to clean up the house of Israel, to prepare for the return of our people. But it's starting in each relationship. In each relationship that each and every one of us possesses. Are you willing to lay your life today? Look at this. When you lay your life down in such a fashion, you will know it, because it says, the very next verse, let him sit alone and be patient when he is laid upon him. Friends, a lot of you watching those programs again and again, and I have a word for you this evening. A lot of you write to me, I started to journey in the Torah, I started to journey in the mitzvot, I am not Jewish, now my family is rejecting me, now I have no relationship with my mom and my dad, and my family is in a chaos because of my conviction. First of all, let me give you a word of comfort. When you decide to take the yoke of the kingdom, when we decide to take the yoke of the kingdom, without a shadow of a doubt, we will sit alone. We will be rejected. We will be despised. It's happened to the Messiah, and it is also going to happen to you. The prophet is saying this, but it is this exact suffering that is going to bring hope for redemption. So if you're suffering today, don't be competitive. Don't be cruel. Don't do those things for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Don't do those things. On the contrary, look at the portrait of the Mashiach, the one who is the under Mashiach, the one who is partner with Mashiach on establishing the Musar, the yoke of the Messiah. Look at him. It says, let him put his mouth to the dust. There may be hope. When is hope coming? When he take a dust and put in his mouth. In essence, what the prophet is telling us here, he is willing to humble himself. He is willing to shut his mouth and suffer. Yes, today, in the day of Tisha B'Av, is a day to put down the sword, friends. It's a day for us to stop the fighting. It's a day for us to stop the combat, stop the division, stop the things that divide us, and do the exact opposite. If we are to experience hope, let him offer his cheek to the smiter. Let him surfeit, I guess it says, with mockery. What does that mean? Yeshua is speaking about turning the other cheek around, but we see it in the book of Lamentation. The Geulah will come only when we take the yoke, willing to suffer alone and even turn the other cheek for those who oppress us, for those who abuse us. Through that, the Geulah is coming. Friends, put down the sword today. Don't be cruel to one another, and take upon yourself the yokes, or the yoke of the relationship of the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. Look at this. It says in Chagiga, chapter 4a, when Rabbi Ammi reached this verse, he cried, "Let him put his mouth in the dust. Perhaps there is hope." He said, "A sinner suffer through all this punishment, and only perhaps maybe hope." When Rabbi Ammi reached this verse, he cried, "Seek righteousness, seek humility. Perhaps you shall be hidden on the day of the Lord's anger." Zephaniah 2:3. He said, all of this is expected of each individual, and only perhaps God's anger may be hidden. Likewise, when Rabbi Asi reads this verse, he also cried, "Hate the evil and love the good, and establish justice in the gate. Perhaps the Lord, the God of hosts, will be gracious." And he said, all of this, and only perhaps, and only maybe. What is the point? Our rabbis explain to us that when a person suffers, when a person is going through suffering, a real suffering, he will be able to overcome the travails of the Messiah and the birth pangs of the Messiah. And right now, we are entering into a season of the travails and the birth pangs of the Mashiach. I know that you know that. And Chazal point is here is clear, according to Zephaniah, that those who will exercise the yoke of the king, those who will take upon themselves the yoke of the king, will be spared, will not perish. Those who know how to treat one another in accordance to the yoke, the musar, the laying of the life. Again, the word yoke here is the emptying toward one another. Those who learn how to empty themselves toward their brother, without a doubt, those will be the one who will be able to overcome these travails of Mashiach. Chazal concluded and say to us, as the temple was destroyed by baseless hatred, we also must do a tikkun by baseless love. When everybody in Israel will love his own brother freely. What is the antidote? The yoke. What is the word yoke mean? Mesirut. How Chazal interpret the word mesirut? Baseless love. We need to pray today, and I'm telling you, don't fast on the 9th of Av if you're not willing to exercise baseless love. Only baseless love, unexplained love, a love that causes a person to empty himself to his brother. Only that going to bring Mashiach to the world. Only that will prepare the stage for the coming of Mashiach. Look at Rabbi Kook, the first Ashkenazi chief rabbi of Israel. He says this: if we are destroyed, ve'im nichravnu, ve'nichrav ha'olam imanu al yedei sinat chinam, נשוב להיבנות העולם עמנו, ייבנה על ידי אהבת חינם. And what did he say? This is the very first chief rabbi of Israel. He said, if we are destroyed and the world is destroyed by us, not by God, by our choices, by baseless hatred, the world, the new reality, the new creation, the new temple will be established by us only by baseless love. He continued. And the Rabbi Kook says, therefore, he give us this. And I hope everybody say it upon themselves right now. I hope you say it with me. Therefore, it is better for me. Say it with me right now. It is better for me to fail in baseless love than to fail in baseless hatred. Are you hearing what I'm saying? It is better that I fail in baseless love than I fail in baseless hatred. In essence, we're going to continue to learn how to love and how to love, rather than trying to fail by having a negative message, a negative heart toward our brothers and sisters. This is what our rabbi said about Mesirut Nefesh. Was Yeshua's sacrifice on the cross a kosher sacrifice? People ask me all the time this question. He was human. At least he appeared as human. He was not sacrificed on his altar, on any altar. How can it be that his sacrifice atoned for anybody's sins? Here is the answer, friend. I hope you understand this. No one has greater love than a person who lays down his life for his friend. This term in Hebrew, laid down his life for his own friend, is the term, the yoke, the Mesirut. Yeshua know what he's saying. Yeshua know the terminology that he's using. He's talking about this ultimate love, Mesirut Nefesh. And he says there is no greater love. A person who exercises Mesirut Nefesh and lay his life for his own brother, the atonement that is made, as you saw earlier from the Midrash, his atonement can count for the atonement for all of Israel. There is no person in Jewish history that was willing to give as much as Yeshua the Mashiach for the salvation of the house of Israel. To be abused, to be crucified, to be made fun of by his own people. He was wounded in the house of his lovers, Zechariah tells us. What about us today? Are we going to build a temple today? Or are we going to destroy another temple today? Chazal said that the reason we all lament today is because the third temple is yet to be established. There is no third temple, meaning we have not loved each other enough. Friends, it's time for us today to learn how to practice Mesirut, the yoke of the relationship with one another. I love this. In conclusion, there is a discussion in the Zohar between Hashem and Mashiach. And God says to Mashiach, hey, Mashiach, you're going to have to suffer for Israel. Wow, you don't have to suffer for them. What is your choice? Listen to what the Yalkut says in conclusion. Says, Master of the universe, in gladness and in joy of my heart, I receive upon me this suffering, so that none from Israel will perish. This is my will. Why is it that Yeshua sacrifice is acceptable to God? Because it was the will of Yeshua. He took upon himself this thing. And my heart desire for you, friends, this holy evening of Tisha B'Av, is to take upon yourself in joy, in gladness, the dust, the ashes, the ashes that are make you humble because you have to dig down, fill them with your mouth, turn your other cheek, and take upon yourself the yoke, the Musa of the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. Let me pray for you this holy evening. Lord, as we are in Tisha B'Av now, and we ask the question, Eicha, how is our families? How are our relationships? How are our cities? How are our countries? How did we regressed and transgressed from you so far? Lord, it's not because of you. It's because of us. We chose it. We chose to be proud and arrogant, cruel, selfish, with a lot of pride. And this evening, Lord, as we destroyed the temple of the living God, where each and every one of us is a living stone, we're thankful that you have given us today a very important word about the yoke of your baseless love, the yoke that will establish again the temple, the yoke of Musa that command us by our rabbi, by our master, to lay down our lives. Thank you, Lord, for all the cheeks that will turn, for all the lives that will be impacted, for all the stones that will return to their status of precious stones. Thank you, Lord, for baseless love that will hasten the coming of the Messiah.